Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. I chose to start this podcast for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest ones was that I love podcasts. 9 3/4 times out of 10, if you see me walking the dog in our apartment complex, I've got an AirPod in my right ear and I'm listening to a podcast episode. Right now, I'm binging a podcast called Work Life with Adam Grant. Adam is an organizational psychologist. In other words, he helps people and organizations harness their power to most effectively get things done. And with episodes on his podcast like Networking for People Who Hate Networking, The Office Without A-Holes, and The Perils of Following Your Career Passion, I can't get enough. Here's a question I'd love to hear back from you on. What podcasts, besides this one of course, are you loving right now? Let me know on Twitter at Therapist Theater. That's at THERAPIST Oh, and here's a public service announcement. Today is Wednesday, June the 12th. Father's Day is in 4 days. If you haven't mailed a card yet, do it today. Your dad loves you, and you should tell him how much you appreciate him. This week's guest is Phil Herndon. Phil is the clinical director of several branches of Sage Hill Counseling here in Nashville. Anytime that I get a chance to be with him results in me walking away feeling encouraged and wiser. People say nothing is impossible, but I do nothing every day. But I guess for right now, we should do something. So let's dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Phil, thank you so much for being on the show.
Glad to be here, Josh. Long time no see.
I would say like thank you for coming, but I'm in your neck of the woods.
So Josh, thank you for coming.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the welcome. I like to start out every interview with just asking my guest why therapy.
My therapy, big question. I have a pretty simple answer actually. Because my entire life, for some reason, I have been drawn to the word is shepherding. This is a true confession time. I used to cheat on spiritual gift inventories. I'm bound and determined this one's going to be knowledge or teaching. I'm going to see to this. I even used the shape thing from Saddleback. You're familiar with it. You know what? This time, knowledge, teaching, always shepherding. Peg the meter on shepherding. And I've been asked a question before, like what drew you to this? And I think part of what God honed in me was this deal. People need shepherds. They need people to guide them and direct them and walk them through stuff and kind of take them by the neck and pull them back into the grass. They're about to fall off the canyon. So for some reason, my whole life I've been geared toward seeing the world through the eyes of the guy who used to hear a world through a wall.
Did you have somebody that shepherded you?
I did. Two people. One was my grandfather. Early on, he was a heavy equipment mechanic, and he probably left Monroe County, Mississippi, a dozen times in his 74 years of life. But kind, gracious. There's a phrase out there called "believing the best." That the man believed the best about me, and he would give me redirection. I grew up next door to him my first 7 years, and so kind of made a beeline for him every time I could see him. But like safe is a word to describe him, kind, gracious, and grace giving. And so him, and then later on in my life, a guy named, give his first and last name, lives in this area, a guy named Chuck Gaines. He was a youth minister through my middle school and through my freshman year of high school. And the guy just loved me. I mean, again, he shepherded me, and he was such an impact to me. Sheila and I, we've been married 30 years, and we've been married about 22 or 3 years. And one day she said to me, "Will you please find Chuck Gaines?" Like every third sentence out of your mouth is this dude shows up. Like who's this Chuck Gaines guy? And so I Googled him, and turns out he lives right here in the area.
Wow.
So I texted him, emailed him, found his email address, and we reconnected, and we have contact with each other now. And we met at a Cracker Barrel for lunch one day. We had not seen each other in 33 years. And I sat down, and I just looked at him and flowing tears. Of course, my memory of him, he's like 9 feet 13 inches tall.
You probably a bit smaller.
And yeah.
And you're not a short guy yourself.
No, but I walked in and saw this kind of short guy. I went, "Yeah, I'm looking for Chuck Gaines," jokingly, like, "Wow, he shrunk." And but turns out he's just a human. But it's just those two men in my life were, I can't get away from the word shepherd. So when I sit across from people, it's like, this is a, on some level and different way, this is a lost sheep. Need help.
Huh. Was there something that you felt like you could identify that you got from being shepherded that you wanted to give to others?
Yeah. Man, that's a great question. Gosh. Safety. Safety. The church where, and my grandfather's house next door to my house growing up, my early years, it was a neighborhood church. Could walk. As a matter of fact, many days. I grew up in suburban Atlanta. Grew up in Marietta before everybody in the world moved there. So it was a neighborhood church in suburban Atlanta, Marietta, Georgia, and so I would go to the church every single day in the summer to hang out with him. And I told him that day at lunch. I said, "Look, I'm a Christ follower, and I'm so grateful to God for atonement and eternal payment for my sin." I said, "You know what? If you had been a whateverist, I was going to go to church. Because frankly, at that time in my life, I didn't go to church really for a relationship with Jesus. I went because I had a relationship with you." And so that brought in me, there is such healing power in knowing the person sitting across from me, across from you, cares and will admit when he's stuck or at an impasse maybe. Mm-hmm. But, the word safety and the word stay, I think, are huge.
Yeah.
Like, I will stay with you. If someone says to me, or I say to you, or you say to me, "Hey, I'll stay with you. If I don't know the answers or I don't know what to do or say, I'll stay with you."
Yeah.
It's very powerful to me.
And I could imagine feeling seen by somebody, mm-hmm. Feeling like you are seen and that you matter and that they notice you and they know when you're there and they know when you're not there.
Yes.
That instills in a person this undeniable sense of value. I matter to them. Mm-hmm. And I've often said, my parents split when I was a sophomore in high school. And it was around that time that I had several adult caring men at my church that really saw me and zeroed in on me. And I've often said, I don't know if I'd have made it out of high school if it wouldn't have been for those guys. And so, I'm hearing you say, because you were shepherded, because you were seen, that it instilled something into you that grew into, this is something that I want to give. This is something that I want to provide to others because it made such a big difference to me.
Well said. That's absolutely right.
Nice. So, bringing that into the present, we're here at Sage Hill, Murfreesboro. Mm-hmm. How does that shepherding inside of you work its way into your current role? What is your current role? How are you expressing this thing that's inside of you through it? Yeah.
Current role is kind of twofold. I'm, the title is clinical director, both here at our local location for Sage Hill here in Murfreesboro. And then organization-wide, there's a location in Nashville, one in Brentwood. I provide help therapists develop skill. In some ways, I get to, I'm really blessed. I get to pour into them, shepherd them some, develop mostly younger therapists. Some of it is, working through what they're doing with people that they see, and some of it is what they're doing in their own lives. And so that's one role, kind of company-wide. And then here, I maintain seeing some people here in this office for therapy, and then I do some therapist development here within our own team here in Murfreesboro as well. So it's kind of we desire really to be, one of our taglines is, we're a social impact organization. It's not just a place to come and do session after session, but I love watching a footprint grow in a town that I love, and it's my son's hometown, literally has become mine and my wife's. And so I really enjoy Sage Hill becoming a place of safety, of haven, of competence, of impact, of teaching, leading, equipping. Now there's a little sign out over the little pew we have in our waiting room just outside this door that says, helping people see who they were made to be so they can do what they were made to do. And I think it really sums up what I get to do.
I always tell my clients that, my job is to help them become more them.
Yeah.
So,
right
whoever it is that you are and you were created to be, I want to help you augment that. Mm-hmm. I don't want to tap anything down. I don't want to slice off anything that should be there, but rather, how do we find that true self that you have and then help it bloom?
There's you've probably heard it, and it's a great story, even if it's just like parabolic. It's a great story that Michelangelo was sculpting one day and chiseling rock, and a guy walked by and goes, "Wow, great master, what are you doing?" And Michelangelo said, "Well, I'm sculpting a lion." The guy goes, "Man, I could never do that." He goes, "Oh, sure you could. All you do is chip off everything that doesn't look like a lion."
Yeah.
And that's kind of therapy. Like let's together chip off this stuff that doesn't look like Josh. It doesn't look like Phil. It doesn't look like the persons who can cross. And so, like you said, so you can be you that God created.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm even hearing you, when you talk about your role, you're getting the chance to shepherd on what I would say is like a micro level, person to person with other therapists, helping them grow, person to person with clients. Although the counseling relationship, not exactly the same as it, but there's a little bit of leadership and things involved.
Yeah.
But then also on like a more of a macro level too. And I would say contributing to the community, giving to the community. What is it that Sage Hill can do for Murfreesboro, give to Murfreesboro, rather than just take from, plopping down, booking to the session limit and just seeing people and taking their money. How can we give back?
Yeah.
That's a pretty full expression of your manufactured spiritual gift that you that you cheated to get there.
Quite the teacher there, Josh. I hate to say it, but that knowledge and teaching things pretty high.
What's funny though is that has come up several times whenever I've had a guest on that's talked about a personality assessment or something like that. It seems like at some point everybody's cheated to get something.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
good.
My thing was, somebody was saying something to me about it, and I was like, oh yeah, just like on the Harry Potter Pottermore thing, like I definitely cheated the first time to get Gryffindor, and then I went back to do it for real and see what I got when it said Hufflepuff. I was like, I don't like this, and I deleted my account, and never happened. Never went back. This doesn't count. This is a bad one. This is a bad one. Well, that's cool, and that's definitely, I think. I wonder if it's a chicken and an egg thing, because you say that you always kind of fudged the numbers to get towards those things, but here you are, as the head of an organization, using these things that you fudged to. So, I mean, I wonder, were those things there already? Or did fudging the test and that passion that was within you to be a part of those types of things produce them?
Yeah, I don't know, but
does it matter?
And I hope not. But I tell you one thing though, it just the fact that I didn't have this big tendency toward fudging the numbers. So I'd be a great administrator because I can't organize that phone on a table. So I do know that there's something already present. I said, I want to move into this. This is, was it Eric Little that said, I experience the pleasure of God when I run? It's like, first of all, I don't. when I run. But, like I do experience
Chariots of Fire?
Yeah. I do experience the rightness or the fit of shepherding, and then behind that, some teaching and leading stuff too.
I've read a couple of things in the past couple months. Some people call that when you're in flow. Some people call it when you're in the zone. But it's just that place where your gifts, your talents, your true self encounters a need. And when you can match those things up, it's a beautiful thing. And it's where, fulfillment comes in. And I was saying to a client the other day, I don't necessarily, I think they brought up the quote, find a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. And I said, that's a pretty privileged thing to say, I think. Right. Some of us have the chance to do that. Other people just need to pay the bills and they got to get through it. And I told him, it's not so much you got to find a job that you love, it's that you got to find your why. Sometime last year I finally got around to reading Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yeah.
And he was a therapist who was captured by the Nazis and put into Auschwitz, and I had never known, but while in Auschwitz had German soldiers come up to him to basically seek therapy while he was a prisoner. And all of his family, I think except for a sister or a daughter, but like one or two people were killed by the Nazis. And he came up with a form of therapy called logotherapy, which was basically, man can get through any what as long as he knows his why. And, so with this client, I just was telling him, sometimes you just got to go out and get a job. And if that's flipping burgers, as long as you know why you're doing it, I'm flipping burgers because I want to provide a roof for my kids. I want to make sure their bellies are filled and they got clothes on their back. Yeah. You are going to flip those burgers better than anybody's ever flipped those burgers because you know your why. But if you show up to, the burger place and you have no idea why you're there and you used to do a white collar job or whatever, you're going to hate every minute of it. So to be in a position where you've got not only, your gifts and you've got a need, but you've got your why, that just sounds like, I don't know if I can think of anything better than that.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah, I was telling you earlier, I'm 57, like, okay, well, may have been a bit of a late arrival, but here we are.
Yeah, I was a little bit of a late arrival myself.
Yeah. There's a book on that note, on both of those notes, the late arrival part and the why part. It's a small little book. I kind of read it and thought, man, this will be a national bestseller. I think I may be the one that bought a copy of it, but it's called Starbucks Saved My Life. Huh. And it's a guy who, I think it was Wall Street. I don't remember, some big, huge, like Merrill Lynch or something maybe, but it was a big time job. And I think he got terminated or something, and the dude ended up working at Starbucks, like he's pouring coffee and mixing lattes and stuff, and he just talked about all these people that he met, and he would serve coffee to the guy he used to be. Guys would be rude or demanding or entitled or some were kind, and he just did this kind of internal work while preparing coffee, taking a look at where he used to be and where he is. And it's a fascinating book that really does bring those two things, like, hey man, 2 weeks ago, the shirt I had on cost more than what I'll make between now and March, kind of deal. And now here I am, and he's finding, to coin the phrase again, he's kind of finding who he's made to be while not doing what he's made to do.
Yeah. That was my story. Like, I had started therapy in April of 2013. I was working at my home church, got laid off by them in August, but was loving going to therapy, and knew I needed health insurance to make that happen. So I got a job at Starbucks because their health insurance was great. And then while I was at Starbucks, continued on in therapy. I mean, I was with my therapist 2.5 years, did group therapy in the middle of that, like, and this whole time, I don't remember if I've said this on the show before or not, but, you know, my prayer had changed from, you know, I got laid off from a position at a church. My prayer went from, Lord, give me that youth ministry job, to Lord, give me a youth ministry job, to Lord, give me a ministry job, to Lord, give me a job. And about that time, I had gone through enough of the personal work, enough of in therapy, that I came to a place where I just was really liking myself for the first time. And so I remember praying, you know, God, if I get to like myself and I need to sling coffee for the rest of my life to do that, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So the prayer became, I'll take whatever you got. I'll take whatever you got. And about that time, I had a few people, 3 people start to say to me, have you ever thought about being a therapist? And I said, no, no, that's not, you know. And I remember right around like August of 14, November of 14, somewhere in there, you know, praying about, you know, whatever you got. And I remember feeling like counseling was something that God wanted me to move towards. And I remember audibly just going, really? Huh? And so I called
You're talking to me? Huh?
Yeah. And so I called up Todd Wormers, who's been on the show.
Oh, yeah.
He's my best friend. I went to my therapist and I went to my mentor, Dr. David Olshine, and I told them, here's what I think. What do you think about it? And the 3 of them were like, yeah, we can see that. And so I went to my therapist. I was like, all right, what do I do? How do I move towards this?
Huh.
And there's Todd calling right now.
Todd calling on my phone.
Oh my goodness. I wonder if there's a way you could patch him in and do a little call in. But yeah, Starbucks was a big, and on top of that, I met my wife working at Starbucks.
Wow.
We were on the same line together. So I owe Starbucks a lot.
Yeah, you really kind of do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's
We had little bits of green all in our wedding because it was part of the story.
and that, you know, I was amazed. First time I heard the definition of the word providence, like provideo, he sees before. Like that's a great, I love studying that concept, but living in that, you know, and going, there's no way for you to know that here's this guy Sharp is in ministry, youth minister. I mean, you're a Saddleback, man. You're like, you know, you're at Christianity Central out there, and now you're, like you said, slinging coffee. You know, who was to know that you weren't slinging coffee? You were really being prepared, winnowed, and pruned, and trained, and meeting your wife.
And what's funny, you know, we were walking the dog one night. I feel like I say a lot on the show. Leigh-Ann and I have talks while we're walking the dog, but it's one of my, you know, the old story was somebody asked Johnny Cash, like, what is your favorite, you know, thing that's ever happened? And he said something along the lines of coffee this morning at the kitchen table with her, and pointed towards June. I mean, walking the dog with Leigh-Ann, you know, it's one of my favorites. But we were talking one time, and I had just had this epiphany come upon me where I just realized, you know, looking back across the story, there were so many times where I just thought, man, if this isn't the worst thing that could ever. And then as I look back, I realized, you know, if I wouldn't have gotten fired from my church in San Diego, then I would have never moved back to South Carolina. I'd have never gotten a job at my home church. If I wouldn't have gotten laid off there, I'd have never started working at Starbucks. If I'd have never started working at Starbucks, I'd have never met Leigh-Ann. I would have never been in therapy. I would have never learned what I learned that birthed in me a passion for therapy. I would have never reconnected with Todd. I'd have never come to Trevecca. I would have never lived in Nashville and Brentwood, and I'd have never started Mount Sparrow. And it was all from these moments of just, at the time, what I would have thought, you know, clearly God has it out for me.
Yeah.
Clearly this is just the worst possible. And I look back and I just go, oh man, that was just a T-bone in the road.
been so easy for you to walk in Starbucks applying for that job and go, here I am, Josh Treese. I'm a minister. I'm a youth minister. What am I doing in here?
Well, you know what's great is that I didn't apply for the job.
Oh, you did?
I was in that Starbucks working on, so in that portion of time where I got laid off. So I was in that Starbucks working on a writing project. And a friend of mine worked at that Starbucks, and it was actually the daughter of the guy at my home church that laid me off.
Oh, wow.
And I would speak with her every time I went in, and at one point she just goes, hey, the boss is looking for some people. You want me to talk to her about a job for you? I was like, yeah, okay. So she goes to the back, and I see her come out with somebody else and point, and the boss goes, and I went, hey, and just get a little wave, and then she walks over and just starts talking to me. She goes, so you want a job or what? I was like, yeah, sure. When can you start? Whenever you need me. Okay. Show up here tomorrow. Okay.
Wow. It's a daunting application process.
So it wasn't even like I had to have this moment of like humility or humiliation. It was just, I was there working on something that was an important part of what I was doing. And it was given to me. And then I remember on my first or second day sitting in the office in the back, little tiny table, not a lot of room in Starbucks in the back room. And the boss was going over these training things with me. And in from behind comes this beautiful girl wearing a black polo shirt and khakis that was coming back there to put her jacket up. And the boss said, Josh, this is Leigh-Ann. Leigh-Ann, this is Josh. And that was my wife.
Wow. That phrase, you never know, like that's really true.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah. Wow. It and it's one of those things where, and this is from, I don't want anybody to hear this and think that this is like an easy realization or that I'm minimizing the hardships somebody's going through. But it's one of these things where after 3 years of therapy, of individual and group work in the middle of that, and 6 years of life since then, I can look back and say, these are things that shaped me into who I am today. I think it's probably impossible to see those things in the middle of it.
Yeah,
You're too close to the picture.
For sure.
But to be farther down the road, I can say I wouldn't be who I am and where I am if I hadn't have gone through, those things. And I know I wouldn't be, as good of a husband to Leigh-Ann. I wouldn't be as good of a friend. I wouldn't be as good of a therapist.
No doubt about it.
But now that I've made it all about me, my why for therapy was something similar to you. I was given so much from it.
Yeah.
It was transformational that I wanted to be someone who could give it to others. That was my why.
2 Corinthians 1.
Yeah.
Overflow what I've been given.
Or even Genesis 12, you've been blessed so you can be a blessing.
You bet.
And it's something that I strive for, and I think probably struggle over. I had a client who texted me, the other night saying he wanted to reschedule because of financial type stuff, and less than 24 hours before the session. So the policy is, and here we're walking the dog again, and I'm talking about it. I'm just like racking my brain over it because,
That's so scary to do that.
Yeah.
Have a boundary, stand behind it. And, taps into every little shame message I've ever had.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you're not worth it anyway, or who do you think you are? And hey man, the guy can't come. Like cut him slack. And then that little voice, give the kid a break. Like, well, is this giving the kid a break, or is this me not dealing with codependency very well?
Yeah, and I said that to Leigh-Ann. I was like, there's a part of me that is thinking, if I do this thing to a client, I'm doing it to the client.
Right.
Air quotes. Are they not going to like me and not want to show up?
Yeah.
Versus having a healthy boundary and sticking to it. And it is something that you tell every client. So I ended up, reaching back out with not a simple yes or no, but kind of a, hey, let me remind you about the policy. But also, if money is the issue, I do have a certain amount of reduced rate spots I'd love to invite you to come into the session and let's talk about if that's what you need. And he came in, and it was a great conversation. But there was fear on his side. There was fear on my side.
Shoot, yeah.
Unless you kind of make the covert overt, then there's no way to even have a chance of dealing with.
I heard a great, I guess it's an analogy. I get all these, English things, metaphor, analogy, simile. It's one of those. Mm-hmm. But I read it this past weekend. It said, how do you keep a person from seeing a rhinoceros standing in the middle of the room? You unleash 1,000,000 mice. It's so true, like the rhinoceros in the room is, something's going on, and I've got all these mice running around I'm paying attention to. Well, I'm making up stories. I'm panicky and codependent and afraid, if I set a boundary or stand behind it or actually have an identity with somebody, then I'm going to be abandoned and thrown out on the sidewalk and, all that stuff. And so sometimes, it's so scary just to point to the rhino.
What's that?
Yeah. We need to talk about this right here.
Yeah.
Because this is big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what movie did you bring to talk about today?
I brought Christopher Robin.
Yeah.
There's something about that movie. I've seen it twice, and both times I went, look, I knew this was going to tap into childhood and feelings and experiences and attachment. What did you choose that one for? Uh-huh. Like, there's all these blow-up movies out there. Come on. And I did it again.
We went and saw that in the theater when it came out, and, man, I was wrecked.
Oh.
And it was on top of that, it was one of these things where, like, because it was just last year it came out, I think. And I was like right in the middle of trying to get the practice up and running. And, you said you'd been in private practice a little bit, but I'm sure getting Sage Hill off the ground was kind of like this. It's like all you're thinking of, you find little ways of sneaking in work, even when you're not quote unquote working and all that. And then I'm like right in the middle of that. And then, the two of us go see this movie, and there's all these parts of, Christopher in his adulthood, just like tunnel visioning towards that. And then he's getting the call towards his family and all that. And I'm in the theater crying and like grabbing Leigh-Ann's hand, like,
I'll never leave you again. I'm sorry, I work. I know, man. It was brutal. And I told my wife, her name Sheila, I told Sheila, like, Josh has asked me to do this. Such a great, cool idea. That what am I doing this for? Like, there's 1 billion movies made every year. No, I think I'm gonna choose one that just rams a saber through my ribcage.
That's the best kind.
Yeah.
So what was it about the movie that drew you towards it to talk about?
There's this thing in me that I wrestle with, and it's part of growing up. It's part of, fallenness. Who knows it was part of, but, Christopher Robin and Winnie the Pooh represent such vulnerability. And actually, I'm on the verge of tears now that I'm thinking about my grandfather even using these words like, kindness. And Pooh is just like, he's just there. He asks the questions he wants to know the answer to. He asks these really uncomfortable things, and he's just like, he's living in today, and he's willing to wait, and that's so counter to, macho. Like I've told people before, my backgrounds have been athletics, trucking business, not trucking business, men's ministry.
You want to talk about Smokey and the Bandit?
Hey, but tear this up. Christopher Robin, who's that? When you got Smokies, Buford T. Justice. Oh, come on. Way to go, Josh. What a nice bell out. So, it's all these things about Pooh that are so vulnerable. But my life has been so men intensive. And, with CPE the last 15 years has been men, a men's treatment center, and these high functioning, really tough, brilliant, wonderful men who are tough. And I think I'm drawn to this because, again, that word, again, the shepherding part that goes, this whole deal around Christopher Robin leaving behind childhood, but not just leaving behind childhood. We all do that chronologically and intellectually and occupationally. but he left his heart behind. There's always been something to me, and I believe it's from those early experiences with my grandfather and Chuck and other people. There's just something in me that draws me to that story of Christopher Robin, who grows up and becomes this just absolute workaholic. Goes to war and brings back war trauma with him and gets real busy covering, what he experienced. And he's got this beautiful little daughter, this beautiful wife, and though he can't, he's blind. And Winnie the Pooh, if he's anything, he's not blind. And so I think it draws me to what I've kind of always known to be true: heart, attachment, feelings, tears, experiences, caring about life, being willing to be vulnerable. But yet a whole lot of things about my life for a long time were about man stuff and being tough and just working through it and having this, bound and determined, if you work hard enough, you can do it. And if you can't do it, keep working hard anyway, because that's what men do.
Yeah.
And part of that's true. It is what men do, for sure. And hard work is part of life and all that. But I had gone real far away from the true heart of humanness, not just masculinity.
Well, I mean, I think, there's a conversation happening in society right now about toxic masculinity, where it's, to be a man, to be masculine, you have to fit this certain template.
Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up, in South Carolina, very, the idea of a man there, I always said was, you got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. You got to be able to do it by yourself. And if you can't, then it doesn't matter. If you didn't do it yourself, then you didn't do it, And then, to grow up, to do my own work, and realize, I told a client the other day, there's dependence on someone where I can't live without you. There's independence where, I don't need you. And then there's interdependence where I'm okay with me, you're okay with you, but we're better together. And so I think, growing up and realizing that independence thing that I kept going after, that's not healthy, not for me at least. I really want to strive for that interdependence where I've done enough of my own stuff to where I'm good, but gosh, it sure is better with others.
Yeah.
And I think at least what my understanding of masculinity and manhood was growing up, that is different than what that was.
For sure.
Yeah, I had forgotten until I watched this a second time in preparing for this that he had gone to war.
Yeah.
I remembered all the business and all the working and all that kind of thing, but I forgot about that. And it got to that part where he was saying goodbye to his wife in the train station. I just thought, ugh. And there's so many things, which Leigh-Ann and I have been married a year and a half. So we're on the front end of it, Watching that 2 years ago, probably longer than that, 3-4 years ago, would have been a completely different thing. Watching it now, there was, my brother-in-law, he and his wife just had a baby in April, first baby of the family. We got a new nephew. In February, they had a baby shower for the baby. He and his wife live in Massachusetts, in Boston. So Leigh-Ann went up to the baby shower. I had to stay here for work, and that was the first time since we had gotten married that we had been apart at night. Boy. And we were apart for 2 nights. And I just thought, this is the worst. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The only good thing about it was I ate 2 whole pizzas while she was gone. And I told her that the other day, and she goes, all at once? I was like, no. Half of it was for dinner one night. Half of it was for lunch the next day. But then that second night, it was a whole. That was the whole pizza. Yeah. I paced myself at the beginning.
One big old pie.
Yeah. But I mean, looking at it now, just how tough those 2 nights were, and thinking, watching him say goodbye to her, even though I think what you said is true, he had kind of left his heart behind, but he still did, love her, and still did, I can't imagine how tough that must have been. What other things in the movie stood out to you? I think it's the very first line. The thing starts with grief. I think the first line there had this little thrown together party, all the animals, and Owl and Eeyore and Piglet, and
And Winnie the Pooh says, again, what we said a while ago, this is so plain spoken. Winnie the Pooh says, Christopher Robin is going.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
You know, the whole thing, it starts with there is nothing more universal in human experience than grief. Our earliest experiences are, 3 years old, walking down a sidewalk with an ice cream cone, and I drop it on the sidewalk, grief, loss, that's coming, and I think the whole thing starts with that. In some ways, that stands out to me more than the whole rest of the movie, like Winnie the Pooh speaking directly to what's going on. And then there's all these other little,
and that's when he was like a
statements.
kid, and they were kind of recognizing, I think there was a literal, like I think he was going to go to a boarding school or
boarding
something,
school,
but
yeah.
then there's also that kind of abstract, he's going to be moving into this next stage of life.
Yes. And it just all throughout, it's this whole kind of thing that goes through. There's one scene where Pooh just kind of shows up, and at the little park there across from his apartment, and just straight up he goes, are you glad to see me, Christopher Robin? Willing to take a chance.
Yeah.
Sadness is this attachment feeling, and if I'm unwilling to be sad, I'm not going to attach.
Yeah.
And Winnie the Pooh is so attached to Christopher Robin, and he just asks a question, and Christopher Robin goes, no, I'm really not. I'm really busy, Pooh, and I'm not. I mean, and he did all he could to get rid of him, take him back to the wood and all that. But the whole thing is around how Christopher Robin's gotten so distant from his heart, which means he left grief behind. He left sadness behind. He's got too busy to be sad. And all through the movie, Pooh's asking these questions to say, are you attached to me, Christopher Robin? Do you love me? Do you like me? He's just willing to ask it.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Josh, and I'm interrupting the episode to make a suggestion. Remember back in the intro when I reminded you that Father's Day is 4 days away? Hopefully, you've got a card on the way to Dad already. But I've got a suggestion for something cool to add to that. So far on the show, we've had several episodes that have dealt with fathers. The episode on Warrior with Jared Farley, the one on Father of the Bride with Alicia Lewis, We Bought a Zoo with Noah Zoff, and Field of Dreams with David Ball, and The Sandlot with Will Mooney. So why not take a few minutes right now to text your dad and invite him to watch one of those movies with you? Then tell him about the show and invite him to listen to that movie's episode. Afterwards, invite him to grab a cup of coffee so you can talk about it. Oh, and pay for his coffee. Then let me know how it all goes. Okay, back to the show. This is something I can't think of a better person and in a better place to talk about this with. One of the first things that I was given when I started pursuing health through therapy was the voice of the heart. Mm-hmm. It has come up more times than I can count on the show. Mm-hmm. So many therapists refer to it, talk about it. And even then you mentioned, attachment, you mentioned sadness. I wonder, could you maybe give just a little bit of an idea about the 8 feelings and kind of what they are and what they mean and the messages that they give?
Yeah. If this were a video, we could illustrate it really easily. But you just think in terms of just the physical copy of Scripture. 66, books, the Bible, and if you look at or visualize the part of Scripture where human beings were not sad, was lonely for a moment, and God attended to it. No anxiety, no sadness, none of that was going on. And then when you look at the part of Scripture where that's not going to be true in the future, it's 2 chapters at the end. So every page in between Genesis 2 and Revelation 21 is it's the horror of life with great stuff thrown in. It's warfare, and it's trauma, and it's hatred, divisiveness, and disunity, and gossip, and slander, and lust, and screaming at each other, and sexual sin, and it's craziness. And so God in His grace has given us these 8 words, 8 core feeling words, to give me a language to talk to you, my friend Josh, and to talk to Sheila, and to talk to Chip, and talk to Todd, and talk to these people that I love about my experience in this world. And Paul even says that, hey, we're citizens somewhere else. This is like the current shape of this place, that's not what we're made for. And so I've got to have a language in me beyond opinion and thought and cognition that expresses to you my experience in this fallen place. And so I could talk about being angry and afraid and hurt and sad and lonely and full of shame and guilt and gladness with you. And that gives you a picture inside of me of my experience in this place beyond what I'm thinking about life. And, it's one thing to sit with my son. He's 23 now. So when he's a little bitty redheaded boy, he's 4 and 5 years old. And when he's asking these questions of curiosity with tears in his eyes, or he's full of wonder and gladness and he's celebrating, or he's lonely because his friend moved away, that's one thing to see his big old blue eyes full of tears, and he draws up close to me and he's talking about how difficult first grade is and all that kind of stuff. That's a far different experience than him talking about, what he thinks of the couch mom and I bought. Both are important because I love him, but that first scene where he's spilling out these feelings inside of him, his own Luke young experience of the world is a far different intimacy and attachment experience than an opinion or a thought about something. So those feelings are the way Chip phrases it this way often. He says they're keys that let us into our heart, they're lanterns that shed light on our heart, and they're passwords that gain entry into the heart. And so we open up this language of feeling. I'm afraid that a large segment of the church has decided that feelings are sin and we shouldn't have them and those kinds of things, when actually, if you look at those chapter after chapter after chapter of Scripture, we've got to have that language to express to one another, because this is a really scary place to live.
Yeah. One of the things that I think has stuck with me the most, from the very first time I read Voice of the Heart, which I've probably read it 6 times now. I had to write a paper on it at one point, was where he said, you look at the list of 8 and you go, oh, there's only one good one. And then he talks about how, well, there's not such a thing as like a good feeling or a bad feeling. Feelings are neutral because they're alerts, they're messages that go off, tell us to pay attention to something that's going on in our heart. Can you talk a little bit about those messages?
Sure. We'll just kind of go down the list kind of quickly. There's 8 of them. So anger, can be controversial, but anger is what lets me know that I care, and it lets me know what I care about. So words like desire and yearning and reaching and hungering and thirsting and wanting, those are words of anger. Like anger is that thing that stirs in me that God's given me to say, hey, I care about this and I want this to be different. It doesn't mean I can change it. It just means I feel angry that it's this way. And I feel that feeling, and it leads me to this place called passion. There's a gift associated with it called passion. Passion means I'm willing to live in the pain of caring, the pain of being vulnerable.
You said a gift. So, when you have a feeling and you pay attention to that alert, as I understand it, when you lean into it, you can receive a gift from it. You can operate in that. When you're unwilling to engage in it, you operate in an impaired state and an impairment from it. So you said the gift of anger is passion. Passion being the drive to change.
Yeah, and the pain of being alive. Like being angry costs me something. The gift of passion means struggle and pain. And so when I care and I care out loud, it's painful. I want something to be different and it isn't. Or I wish Josh hadn't said that and I feel angry with him and it's painful. So that anger is what lets me know I'm really alive in this thing. And that impairment side, if I deny my anger, avoid it, don't feel it, won't express it, deny it's even there, I get in this condition called depression. And people often will associate depression with sadness, and I do feel sad when I'm depressed, but depression doesn't come from sadness. It comes from a depressing of caring, a depressing of the passion. So I feel my anger, I deal with my anger, I explore my anger, I express my anger to a safe person, someone that loves me, and I receive this gift. This gift comes to me called the pain of caring. And if I don't do that, I end up in this condition where I'm depressed. I won't care. And so they all 8 of them have those. And if you run through them, Fear is what lets me know I could be in danger. It's what leads me to wisdom and faith, the gift of wisdom and faith. I need fear to ask questions, to have discernment, to grow in wisdom. And no parent wants their child to be fearless. And I've heard Chip say 1,000 times, like, does anyone want to fly with a fearless pilot? Hey, man, I didn't check the fuel. I didn't check the brakes. I didn't check the engine. We're getting 35,000 feet right now.
Well, you have to care about something to have fear. So if you're not afraid of anything, if you're fearless, it means you don't care.
Right. And that's called recklessness.
Yeah.
It gets people killed. And so wisdom and faith is a gift of that. If I don't experience my fear, I fall into this condition called anxiety where I take it into my own hands, and that's pandemic in our world. And feeling called hurt lets me know I can be wounded. I can relate. It's a very relational feeling. I can be wounded. I can wound you. You care about me, and I can run a knife through you. It's crazy, but the word hurt means to pierce or to bore through, like with an auger or a drill. And another crazy thing about hurt is the limbic brain doesn't know the difference between physical pain and emotional pain. Is crazy, like we intuitively in our language, if I feel emotional hurt, I'll say that crushed me, that broke my heart. He stabbed me in the back.
Devastated.
Punch in the gut. Like we have all these physical examples. Well, that's intuitive God put in us to say, oh, when I'm emotionally hurt, it's like a physical pain. It doubled me over. It was a punch in the gut kind of stuff. So,
which I've used that to talk about fear with clients as well, because the impaired state of fear, you got rage as well. And I've taught with people about what's the difference between rage and anger.
Yeah.
And I say it's the presence of thought. If I'm angry at something, I can tell you why I'm angry. And I don't mean like an impaired state, but like if I'm in my, true self and I'm angry, I can tell you why I'm angry. With rage, with fear, it's all reaction based.
Yes.
And that's I've talked with clients before about, our bodies don't know the difference you were saying with hurt, but also with fear between what I call, and I still got to get better words, concrete fear, which is like there's a bear running at me that's going to eat me, versus abstract fear, which could be like relational, like my girlfriend's going to break up with me. Our bodies don't know the difference between those two things. And so our responses can be the same, fight, flight, or freeze, whether it's the bear or whether it's, the bay, to kind of use alliterative.
Wow, that come from way back. Way
alliterative terms.
My goodness,
terms
what a
there.
database. Yeah, an easy way to remember it is these impairments are going to take us further from feelings. Rage says, get away from me. I'm too vulnerable right now. Get away. I don't want to feel. I want you to see me. And anger brings us towards something.
And I'll try to, like in the show notes or something, I'll try to link to something if people want to read more, obviously voice of the heart, but also we'll try to put up like a chart or something.
Great, yeah.
But you mentioned, Christopher Robin being separated from his heart. How did that end up kind of shaken out for him? Here's Pooh kind of coming in, and there was definitely, systemically, there was definitely a way that Christopher Robin and his family were operating, and then this little gentle stuffed bear comes in and just by starting to ask a couple questions just kind of overturns the apple cart.
Yeah, he does.
How was being divorced from his heart, though, affecting his life?
I mean, it's sad. There's a line toward the end of the movie, Rue, the little baby kangaroo, said, "What's a Madeline? And if she's important, why isn't she with you?" It's such an innocent question. It's like that's how he'd gotten separated. He's working. The guy even shows up at the cottage where they are and looks in the window at his family and doesn't let him know he's there. So he's sneaking Pooh back, getting rid of his childhood. Pooh again, to go back to do work. And the man is so separate. He can literally look through a cottage window at his family who are miles away from home and walk past them, completely separated from his heart, no feelings that he's aware of, and attempt to stuff Pooh back into a tree to get back to the 100-acre wood so he can get on with being a workaholic.
And what's sad is that he would probably say that he was doing all that work to provide for his family, when the whole time that's not what his family wanted. It's not what they needed.
That's exactly right. He, there's this thing, he carries this briefcase around, everywhere. And this beautiful line where Pooh calls it the keeper of important things. And one more sign of where the man's briefcase, not his heart, not his heart being the keeper of important things, his briefcase, his business, his office. And so all these pictures throughout the movie of this man who, with all these symbols, like this man is living out of his briefcase, not his heart. He's working for the Winslow Luggage Company and has lost his way. And it's this great scene where I think it's his turning point, where the little animals are scared to death of these mythical creatures called heffalumps, and so Christopher
Which, by
Robin,
the way, when I was a kid, I remember in the Winnie and the Pooh movie, this Heffalumps and Woozles song.
Oh yeah, me too.
I remember being like, ugh.
And the animation around
Yeah.
it. So Christopher Robin gets back in touch with something I think is so key. And we talk about it a lot in therapy. That is so key. Christopher Robin got back in contact with his imagination. Because he runs under the tree. Remember, takes Eeyore with him, and Eeyore kind of goes, I see what you're doing. So he has this imaginary fight with the heffalump. Remember, he's under the tree. He's fighting Aries, stomping on his coat. You heffalump. And so you watch Christopher Robin transform. He gets beginning to get his heart back because he gets his imagination, this imago, this image inside of him of how what life really is, what really matters. Mm-hmm. And so he's imagining this fight in this imagination. And Eeyore's kind of in on, oh, yeah, he got him all right. And then all of a sudden he's attaching back to his child. He's attaching back to these quote unquote toys who are coming to life.
Really his true self.
Mm-hmm. Imagination.
You mentioned in passing a little bit earlier CPE. Just from what I know about you and, what I know about Todd and stuff, like I know that a lot of your work has been with people with addictions. Mm-hmm. How is it that, this concept of being divorced from your heart, engaging with the feelings, how does that fit in with addiction? Yeah.
Well, absolutely directly. I mean, I don't know that there could be a more direct connection, addiction is a feelings disease. The draw. I mean, no one sits around and goes, I can't wait to get cirrhosis. I'm really looking forward to dying of liver disease in my 50s because of alcoholism, or nicotine addiction, lung cancer, or whatever the addiction may be. So it's not a logic disease. It's not a moral disease. It's not a willpower disease. It's a feelings disease process. And so what a powerful draw. I can put something in my body or act out something sexually or shopping or gambling or whatever, and I can medicate. I can get this temporary anesthesia in me that takes me completely away from these pesky feelings where I really care about life. And so the hook beyond physiology, the hook is I get to medicate feelings away. I get to live according to my own oaths, my own vows. These things I said I would never do. I'll never cry again. I'll never hurt again. I'll never this. I'll never that. I'll always do this. I'll always do that. I'll always be on top. I'll always be in power. And I get that substance in me or act out this thing out of me. And it is a tailor-made counterfeit fulfillment of real life. And so job one in addiction recovery beyond abstinence is get back in contact with that heart and pay very close attention with my chest, pay very close attention to what's been going on that's got all this medication thrown at it. What's going on in there where you were really made to live that all this medication is covering up? Mm-hmm. What is so painful? What is so scary to look at that you're anesthetized all the time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned abstinence. You're talking about getting sober from whatever the addiction is, whether it's a substance addiction, alcohol, drugs, or a process addiction, sex addiction, gambling. We're starting to see the rise of like video game addiction,
gaming, yeah,
that kind of thing. And I always tell clients, because that's my primary specialty as well. We gotta be able to drive down two roads at once. Which, by the way, this is impossible. We've got to be able to work on sobriety skills. Because we can't do heart work unless you're sober, while at the same time, we've got to be doing heart work as a part of getting sober. Yeah. So I always encourage my clients to be involved in a 12-step program because we have 1 hour a week. and you just can't drive down those two roads at the same time for 1 hour a week. And
No.
so we can do the heart work in here. I need you to be going to 12 steps to be
You bet.
doing the sobriety work, because unless we're doing those two things at the same time, then the heart work, it doesn't stand a chance, because the heart work is going to hurt.
Yes.
It's going to be painful. And unless you can be able to feel those feelings, because it's through hurt that healing comes. It's through actually acknowledging the hurt that you're able to seek restoration, seek recovery, and seek healing from those things and be able to walk forward.
No doubt about it.
And you got to be able to feel it.
Yeah.
There was something as soon as you told me what movie that you wanted to cover, I had this thought, and I had to reference a quote that I had written down. I don't know how many podcasts you listen to. There's one with a guy named Dax Shepard. I've referenced it a couple of times on the show. He's an actor, but he's somebody who's been sober for like 14 or 15 years. Big AA advocate. And he had, you remember that TV show Scrubs?
Yeah.
The guy that was in that show, Zach Braff, he had him on.
Okay.
And in this episode, he said this, and this was something, I'm walking the dog. I hear this quote, and I stop for a second and rewind 10 seconds at a time to type this whole thing out. But this is what he said. I'll just read it to you. He said, I want to figure out how to be 12-year-old Dax, who was just so excited to walk outside and do something. Like I wanted to recapture my enthusiasm for being on planet Earth, that I didn't need to put something in me to get that enthusiasm. And for years, I was pessimistic I was not going to get that back. And I will say around 7 or 8 years of being sober, I found myself like, F yeah, what are we doing? Are we going to go off-roading? We going to I'm pretty on fire to be on planet Earth, which was something I had lost for many years. And that part's really exciting. And, he had said, he was a alcoholic, he was addicted to cocaine. And he was saying 7 or 8 years in. And I, as somebody who's worked with, a lot of addicts, a lot of when I say very successful addicts, I mean in their jobs, but also really successful in their addiction as well.
Yeah, addiction really well too.
Yeah. I mean, I really wanted to read you that quote and kind of get your take on it. And I think it goes really great with this movie too. I mean, what does that say to you?
Yeah. The part where he said, I just want to be 12-year-old Dak, we've worked with guys who have notoriety in some spheres, some of them large spheres. I've heard that type statement, as have you in your office. That really gets down to what addiction does such a great job of covering. Getting back to my own identity, and Dak said it, and the movie said it's an incredible thing. Christopher Robin said, screaming, "I'm an adult," and Pooh said, "No, you're Christopher Robin." I love that line. That's what he's talking about. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm an adult, I'm Dak, I'm an actor, I'm so-and-so, I'm a surgeon, I'm a therapist or whatever. And that heart keeps calling. I'm the voice of God, the Holy Spirit, and heart keeps calling and says, no, you're not. No, you're Philip Herndon, before you were Phil. Yeah. You're Josh, we're two redheaded boys. And it's like that message throughout that whole movie speaks to what he said. And I think a person in recovery 30 years or 10 years or maybe even 10 days, and watch this movie and hear these lines go on, and recognize that recovery is a gift. Christopher Robin says to Pooh, "I'm not a hero, I'm lost," and Winnie the Pooh says, "But I found you." It's like so powerful.
Yeah.
And I've told people before, I've taught some in my church, and I said, I'll tell people my last name's not Nye, but I told my church recently, I don't want to be like Phil Nye, the recovery guy here. However, let's talk about some recovery. And I said, in so many ways, recovery found me. 2 guys knocked on my door and intervened on me. And so this movie and what he said about his own life and addiction and the counterfeit fulfillment he experienced, and through all that noise and static, is like, I just want to get back to him. Mm-hmm. I want to be Dak that goes out and tells the truth and plays and scrubs himself up.
Well, what's interesting, even with Christopher Robin saying, I'm an adult, that is a label that he's putting on himself that he's saying, you know, this is something I have to be. I have to be this. If I'm not this, what am I? You know, but that label of adult, something that he feels like he has to be, and then Pooh saying, no, you're Christopher Robin. It's that your true self question. And I think, you know, I'm sure it's like a stereotypical kind of thing that a therapist would do, but just, you know, tell me who you are. Well, I'm Josh. No, that's your name, but who are you?
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, who are you? Like that true self question that I hate that it's so tough to answer sometimes. Most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's so easy to get lost even as children. There are two lines that Madeline, the daughter, does, and you may remember you'll remember the scene, Josh. It's like the mom goes, "Hey, why don't you just go play?"
Yes.
And Madeline goes, "Hey, I'm going to play better than any child ever played." And mom says, "Or you could just have fun." And the look on her face was like, "Fun? Okay, I'll give it a whirl." And then guess what? When Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore and Lord have mercy, Tigger, you know, when Piglet, when they show up, she remembers she's a child, right? And she starts hitting the tennis ball, and she starts going, "Oh yeah," gets back to herself.
You know, do you think that the animals are feelings?
I wasn't going to say that, but I've seen writing about that.
Yeah.
That
Eeyore's the sadness, Tigger's the joy.
Yes.
I don't know what Pooh is, but like Piglet's definitely the fear, the anxiety.
This sounds crazy in a way. I'm telling you, man, Pooh is a great picture of anger. Pooh's after life. Like that dude just kind of wakes up and goes, "Okay, all right, here's the day."
You know what I like about him is that he's very simple. Mm-hmm. He's not overcomplicating things. Nope. In fact, I'd even go as far as I don't know if you've ever read this book, Essentialism, by Greg McKeown. I will go on record as saying anybody who is pursuing mental health or anybody pursuing recovery from addiction should read Essentialism.
Wow. Okay.
By a guy named Greg McKeown, and it's you know, there's this concept of minimalism out in the world now. It's not minimalism. It's what are the most important things you can say yes to. Mm-hmm. Now go after those. Mm-hmm. Say no to the other stuff so that you can say yes to the things that count.
Yeah.
And which I think is what Christopher Robin's journey in the movie was. How do I say yes to my family?
Yes.
So I got to say no to these other things for that. But I think Pooh is definitely an essentialist because for him it's, how do I be around the people that I care about? How do I go after, honey? How do I go after the things that I, need, that I care about? And I don't need to figure out all the other stuff.
And he went after Christopher Robin.
Yeah.
The guy's after something.
Yeah.
And then, I think it's the final lines of the movie, close to it. Christopher Robin goes, "What day is it?" And Pooh goes, "It's today." Oh, I'm sorry. Pooh says, "What day is it?" And Christopher Robin goes, "It's today." And Pooh goes, "Oh, my favorite day."
Yeah.
It's like, I'm just here, man. And they get that, as crazy and counterintuitive as it sounds, that is an anger, quote unquote, an angry statement. That's passion. Like, oh, my favorite day. I don't know what's going to happen today, but I'm sure going to be alive to it.
Yeah.
I'll wait and see.
You know what line of his really got me? And like I said, when Leigh-Ann and I saw this in the theater, in the middle of starting the private practice, and I you said confession time earlier. I'll confession time now. Now that I've left the other part-time job that I had, therapy is the only job. So I'm falling back into this now. How do I work, more? But when he said, doing nothing always leads to the best kind of something.
I love that. I love
that. That was something that the first time I saw it nailed me because I am just really bad at resting.
Yeah.
I have a false core message in me that rings in my head that says I'm lazy.
Right.
And so there's something inside of me that always wants to prove to, that voice that I'm not. And it's not like I want to just do work it's that I want to do the work that matters to me. So there is a passion in there, but it's that I want to do more of it to show that I'm not lazy.
Right.
And so here is Pooh, coming up to me, doing nothing always leads to the best kind of something. And you have this thing with him, Christopher Robin, reconnecting with his heart and his family in this movie. And I've got the most beautiful, best woman in the entire world next to me when I'm watching this. And I just get hit in the face with that of, the work does matter.
For sure.
Helping others because you were helped does matter. But also, this is your family, and your family matters more. Mm-hmm. And how do you flesh that out? How do you live that? How does that rubber touch the road? Mm-hmm. And it's just, that's one of those, lines from a movie that just with a needle gets tattooed on you and just keeps hurting.
Yeah. Yeah. It keeps on giving.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And, in the therapy aspect of things, we do get to ride on two different roads in a number of different ways. You talked about the mechanics of sobriety and the living in heart, the underneath and the outward things I got to do to stay sober. Two roads at the same time, impossible. And there's these two roads of grown men and grown women that walk into our offices. There's a line that Pooh, it's in that opening scene. He says Christopher Robin is going, and then it's talking about boarding school, and then metaphorically about moving on into adolescence and leaving his childhood. And Pooh mutters, he goes, "I would have liked for it to have gone on longer." And there's a part of, I believe, of therapy, of shepherding, of helping, of coming alongside people that, like, look, I know your brain, your intellect, your responsibilities, your body, a lot of things about you had to go on. It couldn't go on longer. But to me, part of therapy, if I'm working with someone in addiction, someone in throes of depression or anxiety or this melancholia, like, hey, this isn't what I thought it would be, to help them say, you know what, a childlike heart can go on longer. A lot of things can't, but Christopher Robin, if he teaches anything, Pooh's wish at the beginning of the movie is, I wish it could have gone on longer. And at the end of the movie, this man, a full-grown man, has got a wife, he has a daughter, he has a job.
He was a Jedi Knight.
Yeah.
He's been to 2 wars.
That's a whole different movie. But thanks anyway. But you may have heard of it, Star Wars and stuff. But, at the end of this movie, this man is reunited with what's really important and childhood in terms of how he lives out of his heart. Not his job, not being childish, but childhood heart is going on longer. And I think, what a great picture of the therapeutic process of walking along with people saying, hey, I know we're grown-ups here and we got to make livings and feed kids and have roofs over our heads and pay bills. No doubt about that, occupation and otherwise. And God has so wired us to where that thing in my chest, that heart, this feelings and not the actual organ, but where feelings, needs, desire, longings, hope, out of the voice of the heart, where those things reside, that's where childhood can go on longer. I can have real, true friendships where I laugh and cry deeply and where I express to safe people what is really going on. And I can trust that today is the day. And, hey, it's my favorite day. It doesn't mean I've forgotten there's a tomorrow or a yesterday, but I can be present today.
Well, that's my guest a few weeks ago, Dave Yeager, he talked about anxiety and how anxiety for him was, either, living in the unchangeable past or what word did he use? I don't remember. But basically either the past or the future and never being in the present. And I remember, talking to Todd one time and asking him, is there anybody that this comes naturally to? Is there anybody that they don't have to work so hard at it? And he just looked over and he pointed out his daughter, who I think was maybe 3 at the time. Yeah. I was like, yeah, her.
Great
and I was
answer.
like, what?
It's true.
And he was like, yeah, when she's sad, she cries. when she's angry, she, does this thing with her fists and her face and,
Yes.
makes, this kind of thing. And
Pure expression.
all of her feelings come out as they are when they happen. He said, now it's my job as a dad to help her learn what they mean and help her process them and her to be able to do something with them rather than them doing something with her. He's like, but a lot of us as adults, the reason why we have such trouble is because our parents ground those out of us. Don't feel sad, don't be angry, that kind of stuff. And rather than that, what would it have done for all of us if our parents would have come alongside us and, hey, it seems like you're sad about this. Tell me more about what you think it is that, what is it that you feel that is lost that you cared so much about? Yeah. And to help kind of flesh those things out and express those things. This is just such an incredible movie. I just think if anybody out there is going to watch it, just take the box of Kleenex and just put it right next to you.
Yeah. And watch this man get lost and found.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I said this to somebody else. Have you heard of the Paddington movies? Have you seen them?
Haven't seen them.
Just buy them. If you loved Christopher Robin, Paddington 1 and 2, just go ahead and buy them straight away and watch them because it's in the same vein.
Can I wait a couple of weeks before I do that?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Recovery.
I'm still getting the sword out of my chest.
Oh yeah, but but in that, I would say this is a man reconnecting with his own heart. I think with Paddington, it is how do you connect with others through that, and it's that those are really good ones too. Phil, I was telling you before we started recording that I thought this past week, I open up every show with why therapy. I thought of a question that I wanted to start closing every show with. And that was, tell me something that you have learned from your clients. A lot of clients, will talk about what they've learned from their therapist, but I wonder what is something that you've learned from your clients.
Yeah, I'm really glad you briefed me on that question before we turn these mics on.
I did think about emailing you ahead of time, but then I just forgot.
Well, the question hit me, pretty hard. Like, wow, that, not because I can't think of an answer, because there's just so much. I think if I boiled it down, it sounds like maybe a funny word. It's the importance, along with safety, of patience. Like I find myself, it's my own codependency and fear about anxiety about how fast things are moving, found that, people that sit across from me, that have honored me for years, or almost 30 years, to trust me, to sit across from me in groups and individuals and coffee shops and you name it, to where I want it to move a lot faster because I want to make sure that what we're doing is valuable to them. And often, or at points, people will say, I'm just so grateful that we're able to do this. And that, the sitting patiently while, it takes time. And I know in my head, the therapeutic process, it takes time. Sanctification takes time. But when I get afraid or have anxiety around how fast things are moving, people have taught me through the years, it moves at the pace it moves, and I'm really grateful to be in a healing process. And
kind of a double meaning too, the importance of patience.
yeah, very important. But I really do. I've thought about it when you asked me that. Like, you would think the roles would be reversed. Like the therapist would need to say, "Hey, now it needs to be patient. It takes time." And I'm finding kind of the opposite. Like they teach me the importance of waiting and waiting and waiting, because this thing takes time.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, you've been in this a lot longer than I have. It's something that I'm working on currently, is just realizing those times that I feel like I want to speed up, that's because I'm trying to make it about myself.
Yeah.
I'm trying to dictate the pace. I'm trying to hit check marks on a to-do list of what I think the treatment plan needs to be. Mm-hmm. Whereas this isn't a task. It's not a project. It's a person.
That's right.
And if I am serious in saying to a client that this is a collaborative effort, where I'm going to join alongside you and walk with you through
Yeah,
this,
for sure.
then I need to let them determine the pace of that walk.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be in a supportive role rather than a, whatever the opposite of that may be, a pushing role,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Let's say that somebody was listening to our show today and they just felt like they could really connect with you, and they're looking at doing some personal work and they would love to see you as a client. How could they get a hold of you to do that?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure glad you asked that. That's your best question of the day, Josh. No.
Save the best for last.
It's Sage Hill has a main number, and it's 499-5453, 615 area code, and you'll go into a general call, and you can push 740 from a direct extension, or you can you'll get a call back from the person who does that scheduling, and they'll get you situated in here in Murfreesboro.
Okay. Could they shoot you an email?
Yes. First and last name, Phil, Phil, Herndon, that's Herndon, at sagehillcounseling.com.
Okay.
No,
Anything
love
else that might benefit folks out there? Resources, socials?
Yeah, certainly. There's the website is sagehillcounseling.com. Go on there, and all the locations for Sage Hill are listed. All the therapists are listed, pictures and biographies and that kind of thing. And sagehillresources.com. Chip's written several books, that highly informs what we do. And Voice of the Heart, of course. He's written Needs of the Heart, 2 or 3 other books that are helpful in the same genre around getting the heart back and the language of the heart. And, love people taking advantage of that. And we do periodic things beyond one-on-one or even group therapy. There are many groups that we do too, but things like workshops and training opportunities. And there's Sage Hill Nashville, there's a thing called a leadership lab for leaders, and really some, I think, some very impactful stuff that goes back to kind of where we started, to be a social, a societal impact organization. Lots of stuff on the website for people to look at and take advantage of, hopefully grow in.
Yeah, and I'd say anybody that's listening, we have talked about Voice of the Heart so many times on the show. That is kind of the common language that I use with clients. It's also one modality. It's one worldview. It's one type of, conceptualizing the heart and how the world works. It's not necessarily the only way, but it's certainly a way, and it's a way that I've kind of chosen to communicate and understand things. So if you're listening to the podcast and you are thinking, Josh brings this up a lot, or he talks about the 8 feelings, and you want to dig, deeper into that, that's a great place to start.
Yeah,
is that book.
For sure.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Josh, thanks for coming down. It's been great. Good
Awesome.
good to see you, period.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Good to catch up.
Hi, my love.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going great.
Yeah?
Yeah, really it is.
Well, that's good.
This week is much better than last week.
Oh, yeah, last week was rough.
Yeah, it was very busy.
Yeah. I hope that this week will be the opposite of last week.
So far, it really is.
Wow, what a
Yeah.
week.
What a time
It's
to
Tuesday,
be alive.
lemon.
It's our favorite saying right now.
That's my best Alec Baldwin. It's terrible.
It was great. It was a good try.
I'm gonna put this question out there. How many of you have seen the Alec Baldwin movie The Shadow? Because it is one of my good friend Tara's favorite movies to quote.
My hand is not raised.
Yeah.
Just for everybody in the
We'll
audience.
find it and watch it. It's a movie that is based on a 1940s radio program serial, and it is absolutely terrible.
Oh, no.
Yeah. But it's the kind of bad movie that's fun to watch. It's like a good bad movie and not a bad good movie.
Oh, I like those.
Yeah. Or a bad movie.
Mm-hmm.
Or a good movie.
You know what's interesting? I think bad movies can be bad good, but like a bad TV show is just bad. I don't think there's any TV show that's bad, but it's so bad that you like watching it. You know what I mean?
beg to differ, because I have got one in my head right now, and it was called Smash, and it was on NBC, and it was about a Broadway musical. like produce it. It was a fictional show, and it had Catherine McPhee and Megan Hilty, and it was about them putting together a Broadway musical about Marilyn Monroe, and they every week put out songs, kind of like Glee. And it was terrible, and I loved it, and I watched both seasons of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like you're the outlier here.
Well, that may be true. Also, so many people watched The Big Bang Theory, and that was terrible.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I never watched it, so I don't know.
Really
I
bad.
thought people really loved it.
I think examples of it being bad can be found on YouTube if you search Big Bang Theory without a laugh track.
Oh.
Because without the
yeah.
laughter, the things that they cue up as jokes aren't funny.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think any show that has laugh tracks in it, like Friends, is probably like that.
Oh, I'm going to search Friends with no laugh track and see.
Yeah, I bet it seems awkward with no laughs.
Also, I would like to add a laugh track into shows that don't already have it.
like this one.
Oh my gosh. Done.
But it's all my laugh when I get a really high pitched laugh, but it's like multiplied by 100.
There you go.
And so it's just like 100 of
If
my
anybody
laughs.
out there is an expert at GarageBand or Logic,
Please do it.
Please contact me to tell me how to do that. I was thinking more like a show like Breaking Bad or or How to Get Away with Murder.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. P.S. We've been watching that, How to Get Away with Murder.
We're
and
taking a break right now.
we are. I don't think it's an intentional break, though. I think it's just that we got busy. And
Yeah. Well, and it's a lot. Like at the end of a really busy, heavy day, it's kind of tough to...
it's not the one you want to pull.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also because it's infuriating to me. Mm-hmm. Every character makes the worst decisions and and is the worst and continues their descent into worsdom every time they're on screen.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. Nate's been good.
Nate. Oh, I couldn't think of anything else but Nate from The Office. Is the only, and I was like, how is he
Again,
in that
it's
show?
not that I can't hear.
He's the only one that I could think of.
Yeah.
And I really want to watch that show, What We Do in the Shadows, on FX, although it's not on the streaming stuff that we have, because Nate from The Office is on that
Oh, yeah.
as an energy vampire.
Which is a perfect character for him,
Yeah.
it seems like.
Yeah. So now that we've talked about everything in the world except what we came here to talk about.
I just like chatting with you.
Well, of course, yeah. What did you think about the episode?
Oh, man. I said before we hit record that, as the youths would say, it left me shook. But it didn't it didn't shock me. I'm not I didn't cry or anything. But I just felt like everything that you guys talked about pointed out how much this movie gets to the core of attachment and childlike needs. I don't know. Childlike needs sounds bad, but I just mean childlike in the sense that they're just at our core, the most basic elementary level vulnerabilities that I think we all have.
Foundational.
And none of us want, or none of us have an easy time, I think, expressing.
Except 3-year-olds.
Yeah. And Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. Listening to Phil talk was really cool. Sage Hill is really cool. And I know, obviously, you guys talked about the 8 feelings. You've read the book and use it in your practice. And I remember, when we were dating, you sent the book to me just because it had been so helpful for you. And so it has helped me too. It really is just putting language to these basic just feelings. I mean, how much more elemental can you get other than just your feelings and your emotions? And I think it's so hard, especially depending on how you were taught. Sometimes it can just be hard to put language to all of the different ranges of emotion. So, highly recommend that, looking into that book, or at least that framework of thinking, in terms of processing and communicating your emotions. I think that's where it's most helpful for me, is in communicating my emotions to other people, like you, my husband, who hears my
Yes.
feelings a lot.
Who what?
Who hears my feelings a
Oh, I
lot.
thought you said hurts your feelings a lot.
No. I mean, sometimes because we're married, but
Oh, yeah.
you know.
Well, not because we're married.
I mean, like, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So the episode / the interview with Phil, one of the first things, and like, surprise, surprise, something reminded me of mentoring. When Phil was talking about shepherding, and I love the fact that he would cheat on those assessments and give himself shepherding. That made everything in me. As soon as he said that, I was like, boom, I want to be friends with him. We're good. But when he was talking about shepherding, the way that he was describing it, and I forget which like context he was describing it in, whether this was how he had been, I think it was how he had been shepherded. That's what he was describing. It just made me think, oh, that's mentoring. Like, that is an adult coming alongside a kid and A, being a safe person, but then B, being just an encouraging presence, you know, and a support in a kid's life. And not even in a kid's life, just in a person's life. It just goes to show that everybody needs that, you know?
Well, Leigh-Ann, kids are people too.
They are. I would say kids are the most people. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm sure I sometimes sound like a broken record, and people are like, why are you making such a big deal out of mentoring? But
Well, no. I mean, I don't think
just-
people are thinking that, because they know that that's your job and that's your role. And whenever we tape your episode, then I'm sure that that'll come out even more. And that's really the whole point of the show, or at least the whole point of having guests on the show, is to have them speak from their heart and their passion, and their specialties and stuff. And so, of course, that's going to bleed out of you. It's what you spend 10 hours a day doing.
Yeah. And I think, too, like, I say mentoring, but I just mean relationships. Like, something I think I've realized more recently is how the power of relationships has just been a theme in the last couple years of my life. Like, how impactful it can be to have one person that you trust.
Remind me when I'm editing this part to put in a snippet of the Celine Dion song, The Power of Love.
Oh, okay. I wish I had learned it so I could just sing
Or
it
the
for
Huey
you, but
Lewis song, Power of Love.
do that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And along with that, like, around the same time, he talked about his church growing up. And basically he was just saying that, like, it was, I don't know if he used this phrase, but it was like a place for him, a safe place for him. Like, it seemed like it was just a place where he could go and, like, knew that there were people there that he could trust. I think especially right now in this day and age, and also literally, like, this week, you read a story the other day about something that happened in a church. We're hearing a lot of stories and a lot about people's experiences who have not had that experience in a church, where the church has not been a safe place. So, I think, and all of those, I mean, that could be a whole other episode, but there was something in me when he said that I thought, oh, okay, somebody somewhere got it right. It sounds like those people in that place, you know, in that church, was being what it should be. Like, it.
Yeah. And I don't think that the church in general is getting it wrong. I think, thankfully, the instances that it is wrong are being brought to the surface. Mm-hmm. Issues are able to be sifted out. And while I don't think they're being addressed enough, I think that I like to say it's beginning.
Yeah.
And I would personally like to see more. But it is always good to hear about when something went right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm another example of that too. You know, for me, and I think I said this in the episode too, like in high school when my parents split up, you know, the church came alongside me and cared for me in a way that I really needed. And I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. So there you go. Not all bad news
Yeah.
in the world. And then I guess just so that I don't like jump around a bunch, I think along the same vein as, you know, churches being safe or not, he said something he said churches have decided feelings are a sin, or you said it, or he said it. I can't remember which one of you said it. But when I heard that, I thought to myself, oh, those churches are not a safe place.
Yeah.
So I think like that probably does get to, I don't know about like the bottom line core of where all the issues stem from, but I think a lot of issues stem from the church deciding that feelings are a sin, you know, because once you do that, like everybody in the church, the congregation and the leaders are gonna not trust their feelings, not express their feelings. They're gonna like numb and shut down, and I mean that's just all kinds of trouble can come from that.
I don't remember Phil or I saying that, so I'll have to take your word for it. But B,
I wrote it down in quotations, which is how I know word for word that was said.
Well, it's not that I don't believe you. It's just that I recorded
with my
that
favorite ones.
interview 2 weeks ago.
No, I know.
But B, I think that, and this is coming from the place of having worked in churches for 10 years and having attended them my whole life. I think that if churches haven't and I even hate saying churches like it's everyone, but if a church or the church hasn't said that feelings are a sin, they have so massively minimized them and devalued them that I believe that it has potentially unintentionally communicated to people that you should not trust your feelings, that you should trust the Bible, you should trust the spiritual leaders in the church, that you should trust God. And while those things are good and certainly, you know, authorities that in a perfect world would be trustworthy, I don't like the idea of communicating to a person your feelings aren't trustworthy, because I believe that it also communicates that it's like it takes away your internal locus of control. It's like it takes away your agency. It's like it takes away your you.
Yeah.
And I don't what's funny, I don't remember what I thought about it when I was working in churches. And so I can't rightfully say if this is a result of my clinical mental health training, or if it's a result of me being 10 years older, or if it's a result of me, you know, just kind of growing up. I just know what I think right now. But if that's true, you know, I don't like that. And my hope would be that, and you and I have been in discussions for the past week as I have brainstormed all over the walls of our apartment. My hope would be that I could be an agent that could help bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And as I am working on some resources and stuff, that I could partner with churches to help them realize that, you know, mental health feelings are not exclusive from spirituality.
It's not either or.
Yeah, but rather they are a part of it.
Yeah. I think that's real important. Also, when you were saying, when we said taking away your feelings and I said taking away your you, in my head, I also thought, oh, we could call, whenever we're referring to like somebody's true self, like their core self, we could call it their Christopher Robin. Because of when he says, I'm an adult, and then Pooh says, no, you're Christopher Robin. So, like, they're taking away your Christopher Robin. Your true self. Whatever. I'm going to make it a thing. I think the last little thing was just more about the movie, but also just how you guys talked about it, like Pooh being that vulnerable child, like I talked about earlier. And when he asks, Phil pointed out that Pooh would ask like attachment questions, like, are you happy to see me, or are you happy I'm here, or something like that, and how that could translate to like, do you love me, are you, it fill in the blank, like any of the questions that we have like deep inside of us. And that is what made me make all the faces and want to stop my car and just watch the movie and cry. And because I think that's that is just such a beautiful picture of a little teddy bear asking a grown man, are you happy to see me? Like, what, that just it brings me back to my heart a little bit to think about it in that way, and being that vulnerable, I think.
I just like how simple Pooh was in the movie. It was not complicated at all. And like you were saying, just, and not in the bad way that is used in slang today, but just basic.
Yeah. He was. Sweet little Winnie the Pooh.
Love, is there anything else that stuck out in the interview or the movie to you?
Not that I can think of. Although we talked about this before we hit record, when how you were talking about the last 2 episodes, you've talked about fears and you've tried to think of a word other than concrete and abstract. And I was saying, I like concrete and abstract. I think those describe it really well. Or you could just say physical fear and emotional fear. So anyways, I just wanted our listeners to know the update that you have maybe found the words that you're looking for.
Or you mentioned before, maybe tangible and intangible.
Yeah. We're just trying to find you the words. That's all. I just wanted to update everyone.
Maybe we could call it stuff you can touch and stuff you can't touch.
No. Good try, though.
Awesome. Well, I guess if that's all we got for this week, then we got to shut this thing down.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we'll say that we're going to raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say, at least for this week, that the theater is closed.